Would you believe me that half of the specs today are probably in a tier that you did not expect or believe they could ever be in? Let me see if I can prove you wrong. Hi there, I'm Flame from Marcelian&Flame, and today we will be looking at the Mythic Plus meta for the current Season 3 situation as of recording this video, while analyzing logs and rankings and IO scores and key levels cleared to kind of put them all in a list and see who's the winner and who's the loser, because I know everybody likes that and nobody ever has a problem with these things. Speaking of, disclaimer for how we were kind of doing our tier list just to make them a little bit more interesting. Each tier kind of represents the highest level of key cleared by that spec. So let's say S plus would probably be around 19s at this moment. S tier would probably be around mostly 18s from the top players of each spec. A 17s and so on and so forth, just to kind of put them at a difference. Now, that doesn't mean that they're necessarily bad. If you see specs go all the way down into F, that just means that there are a bunch of keys behind the top levels. If we're gonna like be a little bit more general and universal based off spec potential, we could probably put a lot of them into S and A tier and just have it very top heavy, but that would be a little bit boring and will also not really be fair towards some of the specs that are not really equal to each other. And this is all based on data. It's not really our opinion. We're just kind of looking, oh, this is doing 100 dungeon score more than this other spec, so we're gonna rank it a little bit higher. And then if you don't like it, that's fine. You can let us know in the comment section below where you think we went wrong, but that's how we're gonna be doing this tier list. And we're gonna start it off really quick with Frost Death Knight all the way into S tier. As to nobody's surprise, it's doing really well. Is it the #1 played spec at the moment? If not, it is clearing the toppest keys in almost every content, together with, of course, two other specs that are also maybe just as much played, but I think Frost DK is right now the most popular spec in the game. Maybe we can verify that. Moving to Unholy DK, still actually really good. It is kind of getting very close to Frost DK, but probably never really reach it, not this season, unless we're gonna see some really big buffs, well, not big buffs, but decent enough buffs to it and nerfs to Frost DK, which maybe hopefully let's let Frost Death Knights enjoy their reworked spec and have a little bit of fun, okay, while them being meta. But that's where Unholy is at the moment, and we're gonna move on to Havoc. Maybe for the first time in 3 expansions, Havoc has been doing good and bad across the years, but I don't think we've seen it S tier since either beginning of Shadowlands or BFA, when it was just broken. So yay Havocs, enjoy, you've been doing so well, and I have seen you in the keys that we have done and the keys that other people have done, and I'm actually happy for you. Congratulations, you deserve it, enjoy. And because somebody has to take the dip for all of these, we're looking at the balance going into A tier. Now, you might be saying, but balance Druid is doing plus 18s. I think there's like 1 or 2 really good balance players, and the rest are kind of like trailing a little bit behind because there's a reason for it. So right now, our decision is to put balance in A tier. It's not necessarily a bad spec. And if you have seen balance Druid, note that we also have seen balance Druid and we know how strong it is. And despite all of that, we're going to put it into A tier because there's just a little bit of a gap between specs like balance and Unholy, at least at the top end. And we're talking about the top end, the 0.1% of the players playing these specs, because what better way to analyze how good they are if not by just judging the players that play them almost like a robot. Speaking of something that's not a robot, Feral Druid is, yo, oh my god, I thought I moved it into S tier, but it's S plus. Okay, so here's the thing. S plus specs are basically actually broken, or somehow players make it seem like they're broken. They're like a notch above everybody else. I think at this point, I reserved the S plus tier exclusively for specs that have reached 3.6k IO really quickly, potentially also being the first ones to get into an actual proper plus 20. Now there are other specs that kind of reach 3.6, but that's just the player, not the actual spec. So I'm gonna keep Feral at right now because, listen man, I love to see a cat in S plus tier, okay? Now, I don't know if this is gonna last. This is how it is right now. Maybe in a week we'll change. Maybe we'll see some buffs and nerfs that will kind of knock Feral down. But as it stands right now, thank God, Ferals, you enjoy. Not S plus tier is actually Augmentation, and we're gonna bump it down all the way into C tier. One of the worst performing specs in M+, but still, the top augmentations have reached about 3,300 IO score, which is fucking, that's higher than 90% of the players. So listen, it's doing all right. But even looking at some of the breakdown, you've probably been seeing up until now some damage breakdowns. Augmentation is actually really down low. At least this is probably the rank 1 augmentation in Arakara as of recording this video. So usually, you know, whenever you're clearing a first key for the first time, you might not have the best performance. Maybe you haven't gotten used to the route, to the damage intake and damage profile. So that's fine. But even so, 3,300 this early on into the season, that's really good for augmentation. I am actually wrong. I was hoping that Devastation will be higher because in our prediction, I remember this, in our predictions for the season, I ranked Augmentation into like S tier or S plus or whatever it was at the time, really at the top, which I guess is kind of true for Raid, but not in Dungeons. It is really good. I mean, it's doing the AoE of, I guess, balanced Druid. I mean, if you want to call it that way, it has a really good damage profile. I think it just has such high, steep competition for anything higher than this. But it is very close to being an S tier spec. It's actually doing really well. BM Hunter is slightly lower. I think the PTR nerfs have affected it quite a bit to the Stampede, but also the fact that Stampede is kind of like its major damage source is maybe a problem with the spec design and the tiers are being a little bit too strong, but it's not too strong that it should be nerfed. It's the spec itself is too weak, so the tier set is kind of carrying a little bit. Either way, I like seeing Stampede, so there you go. Now, Marksmanship is what I would like to call a proper S tier spec. It's doing really well, at least at the top end. It doesn't really have a shot at S plus tier right now. Like, to be fair, some of the this is how it is, right? S tier is basically, if S plus tier gets nerfed, we could probably see them replaced with anybody from S tier. That's kind of how it is at the moment. Obviously, the top marksmanships are doing 18s at the moment. Not as many as the S plus across the top 10, I guess. But maybe that will change once again in a week or so. I think the physical king right now is still Feral, so I don't know if marksmanship will take that spot. Definitely survival is currently poop. I don't know if it's like the worst spec performing in the game at the moment, but it just doesn't seem to get any higher than C tier at this point. Former favorite spec of mine. I don't like ranking it so low, but it is where it is at the moment, and it doesn't look like that's going to change. I don't think this is going to change at all this season unless we see like some really 180 buffs to it. Arcane Mage, again, probably to nobody's surprise, it is the second or third most played spec, together with Havoc and Frost. They actually comprise the actual top comp. I don't know if I should keep Feral here. I'm thinking of maybe bumping Feral down to S here, but I'll keep it for now because it just looks good. This is listen, if you don't like Feral being S plus together with Arcane and the other ones, maybe you can bump it down to S here. Maybe this will make you feel a little bit better. But it is Arcane, Havoc, and Frost clearing the very top end level of keys, and maybe that makes sense for them to be alone in the S plus tier. Yeah, spoiler alert, you're probably not going to see any other S plus tier specs. Definitely not from Fire, bro. I don't know. At least at some point, survival was a little bit higher. At least at some point, augmentation is has been a little bit higher, but I feel like maybe it's just my own personal bias and butthurt emotions, but Fire just seems to take it so hard every single goddamn season. If it actually ends up niching or touching the middle pack of the DPS meters, it gets stomped into the ground. It started out as a meme, but I legit think that somebody at Blizz right now really fucking hates Fire Mages. I cannot explain it any other way. Like, listen, I understand some people have it their time in the sun, but consistently at the bottom, or maybe I'm just seeing it at the bottom because it's a sort of projecting. Not much else to say. Arcane is basically what, not Arcane, rather Fire used to be what Arcane is now, and it has been nerfed. A really good single target damage spec that has some cleave potential and or decent AoE with almost no single target, which is not something that Arcane has. But the priority funnel slash damage that Fire used to have now seems to be dominated by Arcane, and Fire has been relegated to kind of like a meme spec at the moment, which is not something that makes me happy. Since Frost is also doing a little bit better. Now, I think the #1 Frost mage right now is doing actually really good, but I cannot really bump Frost any higher because of just one player. And that's true for a lot of other specs that are coming right now. Not much else to say about Frost. It has a very specific damage profile where you cleave really well onto targets. You can have some decent single target, almost no AoE until you kind of hit like a critical mass of adds where you just get insane resets on Freezing Orb and Blizzard. And that seems seems a little bit funky. And even then, you still don't out DPS AoE specs like, I guess, Unholy, Marksmanship, Balance Druid even. I think you're still gonna suffer there. So I don't, like the strengths of Frost are outscaled by the strengths of a lot of other specs. Windwalker, solid B tier specs, probably because of a couple of players that are pushing the physical comp group, although most of the physical comp groups do have Brewmaster or Mistweaver rather than Windwalker, as I've kind of unfortunately predicted, since it is currently my main. Not very happy with how it is. I don't think that's necessarily going to change. Its single target damage is decent, and it's the type of spec where it risks that if you buff it a little bit too much, it's just going to explode in the other type of content. So if you buff its AoE too much, maybe you'll make it single target broken and vice versa. I don't know. It's kind of like Fire Mage. It feels like it's been down ever since Shadowlands, ever since Bountiful Brew. That's been 2 expansions already, and it doesn't seem like Windwalker has any redeeming factor. If I wasn't a Windwalker, I wouldn't actually be able to justify ever picking a Windwalker if I wanted to try hard a key. Now, of course, that's the top end keys. Doing your weekly 10s and 12s, you're going to be fine. It's Fire Mages all day. Ret Paladin, I believe they're almost at the bottom of, no, they're actually at the bottom of S tier, but they're almost A tier. They're actually doing surprisingly high keys, like the top 2-3 Reds are doing 18s, which, you know, would normally kind of qualify to close S plus here, but not really, right? Red has suffered a little bit through the damage. We all know the Discord situation. And right now it seems to be doing really well. It doesn't seem to explode like it did last tier, but even so, it's S tier as of this moment, so I don't know what I'm saying. I actually don't really know why it is S tier. Maybe it's just because it's the best Paladin spec, and if you ever need a Paladin, you're probably going to get it from Red, which is something that you couldn't have said about the spec years and years ago. Shadow, down in the A tiers with the rest. I mean, it is taken into some 17s, maybe an 18 or 2, but even there, it seems like the damage profile is a little, well, not the damage profile, but the damage output is a little bit low. So I don't know if we can expect more from Shadow. It had a bunch of swings in its development and tuning phases on the PTR where it was really good, then it was nerfed to the ground, then it was kind of a little bit buffed, and maybe this is where the devs want Shadow Priest to be. I guess it's still one of those problematic specs where if you buff it a little bit too much, it's just gonna break any other type of content, because that's what happens when you have your single target damage rotation be your AoE damage rotation. There's not much you can do in terms of tuning it and giving it some specific niche. I want to say that that's the same for Assassination, but not really. Assassination has a few more options when it comes to doing AoE, and it is doing actually really well. Definitely way better than Shadow Priest, and it is one of the better rogue specs. Actually, I'm looking at my notes here. You might be surprised to know that Assassination is not the only really good rogue spec, and Outlaw is another. I don't know in which order we should put these in. Probably this is fine. Now, if you are looking at the top 10 Outlaw Rogues as of this recording, you might be keen to see that the rank 1 Outlaw Rogue is 3600 IO, which would qualify it for S+. But if you keep looking down on this list, you see that the other Outlaw Rogues are kind of struggling to keep up with this particular beast. So we're at a conundrum. This is why a lot of these specs are S tier, not S+ here, because yes, there might be 1 or 2 good players that are just like fucking crushing it out of the park. But if I cannot see that consistently over the course of the rest. I don't want to say that these players are carried, because fucking they're amazing players, but if that performance doesn't consistently trickle down to at least a few more of the top 10 players, I'm gonna keep it a little bit balanced, right? But Outlaw is actually really good, and Rogue is doing really well. And Subtlety was also very close to make it into S+ here. If you look at rankings like Arcane.gg that you probably saw at the beginning of the video, Feral and Subtlety are ranked at the very top together with Frost, Havoc, and Arcane. But I mean, if we're gonna be honest with each other, so I don't think they're kind of like at the same level, okay? It doesn't mean that they're not good, but that's why we break these down into so many tiers to kind of show, okay, there's a little bit of a difference. They're not quite at the same level, even though they might as well just clear maybe the exact same key levels. Elemental is also top dog. I think, I mean, in raids, it's maybe the best DPSer in raids. So in single target, it has what it has to deal damage. but that's mostly for Farseer. In dungeons, you're probably still playing Stormbringer. At least the top elementals that I've looked at do play Stormbringer still, which is really great. It's, I think, one of the specs still that does almost nothing outside of your cooldowns, and with Elemental you probably really want, especially if you play Stormbringer, your tank to actually pool around your cooldowns, because most likely you're also pooling a couple of Tempests, so a lot of your damage is just funneled into like a very tight window, and you're kind of like a little bit of a diva. I guess kind of Arcane is that way as well, but at least Arcane is a little bit more flexible and has its cooldowns a little bit more often. Either way, like I said, if for some reason they just nuke Arcane out of orbit, it's likely that Elemental is the next in line as the best spec in the game right now to kind of push content. Enhancement has kind of fallen from grace this tier. I understand that either there were a bunch of bugs or too many nerfs or something's not working right, but Enhancement has dropped down a little bit to B tier. This is a little bit surprising because on the P tier they seem to be doing a little bit better than this. However, I mean, this is what it is right now. Maybe that's because some of the best Enhancement in the world are probably playing Havoc right now. Some of them have been known to do things like that, or maybe even Elemental, who knows. But Enhancement is, as of today, a B tier spec, middle of the pack. I mean, it's not bad. It's clearing, what, 17s, 16s? I think it's probably 16s around this point. We might see 17s by the time this video airs, which is in like a day or so. That's just where Enhancement is at the moment. Affliction, I was kind of hoping this would climb a little bit higher, and it's not doing too shabby, but once again, I think it's just not tuned properly or designed properly for Mythic Plus. It doesn't really bring any amazing things. It's heavy reliant on its cooldowns to do a lot of damage and have a lot of AoE, so it's kind of like double dipping into issues that Elemental would have and Frost Mage would also have, and having two issues from different specs and only one real strength, and I don't even know if that's a really good strength, kind of probably warrants its place down into C tier. Demo is doing a little bit better. I think it's B tier in terms of overall performance. I think it was broken on the PTR and then it got gutted. So kind of, I don't know if it's similar. No, it's actually similar to BM. They both got nerfed pretty hard. And just a little funny little note, whenever we do videos like these and whenever we test future PTRs, we always say, listen, if something is really broken on the PTR, chances are that by the time it gets to live, it's just nuked out of orbit. And this is the second spec that it has this happen for it, although I guess Frost DK is kind of like an exception. I don't know why I'm starting right now. I'm a little bit nervous because you're looking at me with the hot, intense gaze. You are beautiful today. Did anybody tell you that? Well, I just did. So let's move on to this show. Speaking of hot, this is another spec that could easily make it into S+ tier. I think the rank 1 destruction right now is just absolutely crushing it. But similar to Outlaw, I cannot in good faith rank it based off of the rank 1 Destroy Warlock. But it definitely has potential. And God forbid we have a Warlock in the top meta comps. We haven't had this in such a long time. It's likely that if the MDI starts, we might see some Destroy Locks in MDIs as well. And last but not least, a warrior with arms. Not too shabby. It is A tier, actually better than a lot of the other specs, from what I can tell. There are 18s being done by arms, but I don't really see that being consistent across the board, and I think we can all agree that warrior just suffers a little bit. I think the top warrior players are just absolute monsters that are just taking these specs to new levels, and Fury is kind of in the same boat where I think Noxiv is still the rank 1 Fury warrior. Matt just fucking takes this garbage spec and just does some incredible stuff, and even if he does, when you look at some of the top keys that he has cleared as the rank 1 Fury at the moment, the damage difference between him and his teammates is just so high. It was the same as last season, and if this is not a good indicator that this spec needs some goddamn attention in Mythic Plus, then I don't know what is, because at this point, I don't know if Fury deserves A tier or if Fury players deserve A tier. I don't know which one it is, but this is definitely not both at the same time, at least in my opinion. But this is how it looks at the moment. Of course, as we do these tier lists, we're looking at a snapshot in time. As of recording this video, nerfs and buffs haven't happened yet after the race has ended. So we're still kind of waiting to see what's going to happen with the class tuning, which might actually happen by the time this goes live. But just so you know, this is recorded a little bit ahead of time, similar to our raid tier list that we did last week, where we kind of looked at the top performers once again prior to the nerfs. It's really fun to see how these evolve over the course of a patch, maybe because this can clarify the community perception and discrimination that people have to our specs, so you can understand, okay, they're not that bad. Invite your survivals and your afflictions. Not in my group though. I'm kidding. See you next time.